Luthen did set up an interesting band of stragglers to commit the heist. From the idealist Nemec, the true believer in the bunch, who was more of a political science/science nerd of the bunch than an actual hardened criminal like Cassian was, and the dynamics of the group was quite something too. From Taramyn, simply being a former stormtrooper having to work with Cinta, whose family was killed by stormtroopers. Cinta's relationship with Val, which complicates Val's already hesitant nature as a leader. Well, she's still learning. While second-guessing yourself is sometimes useful in case you were going down the wrong path. After all, Luthen did say, if in doubt,
something feels off, something turns, someone starts to fold. You step up, you lead, you cancel the mission.
And perhaps for the first time in Star Wars history, we see a leader hesitates on a go, no-go. Perhaps in the face of danger, one would not want to risk your life or the life of a loved one on a dangerous mission.
Go.
We have never seen this in a live-action Star Wars before. Everyone was so gung-ho to kill him. Remember Han Solo just chasing off stormtroopers to impress the princess? Yeah. And it's good to see your loved one in support of your action.
Go.
It makes it feel human. Something weird is happening to Alex Ferns. A trivial but notable barrier is the existence of the one non-universe specific curse word allowed in the whole Star Wars saga.
Shit.
Starring Alex Ferns, who played Peter Savage from The Batman, which also has the one F-bomb allowed in a PG-13 movie.
Happy fucking Halloween.
I mean, if I have a nickel every time Alex Ferns was cast to be the one to drop the one profanity bomb allowed,
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Here's another thing that happened twice to Alex Ferns. You might see him officially listed as Sergeant Koztech. That's because initially this was the character's name, but it was changed.
Sergeant Linus Moss got your service up.
So, if I have a nickel every time Alex Ferns is cast in Star Wars,
I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
we finally get to see how the subtlety of inner office politics in the Imperial bureaucracy works. In Star Wars, we get to see some of that, but it was quickly resolved thanks to the power of the Force.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
And if you will notice to the back, that's Colonel Ullard, one staunch supporter of the Republic who once fought in the Clone Wars alongside General Kenobi, but turned out to be an Imperial bootlicker. Notice his white uniform. These are worn by those involved in the Imperial Security Bureau. And for the first time, 1977, but finally, we get to see how the inner working of the ISB works. And here we find another interesting character, Dedra Meero, not to be confused with Dedra, a Sith believer from the Legends. She was the one who intuit the existence of the many sparks of the rebellion spread throughout the galaxy.
If I was them, this is how I'd do it. I'd spread it out.
Ironically, she was rebuked by the Bureaucracy, both by her peer Lieutenant Blevin, not to be confused with Captain Blevins, who died on the moon of Andor, not Andor, presumably beaten to death by the Ewoks. It's not the first time that Star Wars have done this. I mean, there's Endor and then there's Andor. Meero was also shot down by her superior, Major Partagaz. Ironically, Meero was right. There were pockets of fermenting. And Meero was dismissed, demonstrating the imperial arrogance that Andor spoke about previously.
They're so fat and satisfied, they can't imagine it.
Then Partagaz did exactly the opposite of what the ISB is supposed to do, according to the dogma that he himself laid out.
We are healthcare providers. We treat sickness. We identify symptoms. We locate germs, whether they arise from within or have come from the outside. The longer we wait to identify a disorder, the harder it is to treat the disease.
And by the end of episode 6, it was already too hard to treat the disease.
I want every star sector and planetary emergency retaliation plan in the building ready for presentation by midnight.
Did you notice? He wanted a presentation. Just another highlight for the kind of bureaucracy we're dealing with.
I'm listening.
Remember that. We'll get back to this later when the time comes. Apart from expanding upon the ISB legacy of Ullard, Andor also fleshed out the character of Mon Mothma, an old-timey favorite first appearing in The Return of the Jedi.
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
For a long time, she felt like she's a very staunch leader, but we knew very little of her personal life. It turned out she had a very crappy family. Her husband, Perrin Firtha invited her political opponents for dinner, and her shitty daughter, Leida Mothma, sided with Daddy. In Legends, she also had a son named Jobin, when apparently they only decided to bring in the daughter for Andor. I've seen a lot of complaint bashing Andor for not conforming to the expanded universe, but then again, both of her children aren't entirely fleshed out in the Legends either. Take Jobin for example. His notable appearance was that he was choked to death by Darth Vader at the Battle of Hoth, and there is no way should the canon conform exactly with the expanded universe. I mean, in Legends, Chewie died because the moon fell on him. And remember people complaining about how
somehow Palpatine returned.
Palpatine died like 6 times in the expanded universe. You want Disney to bring back Palpatine 5 more times? They did it once, and the outrage was beyond toxic. People shouldn't behave this way. At least civilized ones shouldn't.
So uncivilized.
And did you see the complaint about Luke Skywalker? In the expanded universe, Luke got married and have children. He didn't only left the Jedi Code, he shat on it. He became a family man instead of some Jedi to the end. At least Rian Johnson knew what Star Wars was about, that he fixed Luke Skywalker from the mess that the expanded universe left about. And it was never canonical.
Deal with it.
I can't stress this enough.
So let me be clear.
A lot of people seem to be under the impression that the expanded universe was canon, at least until Disney decided that it would be relegated to Legends and considered to be non-canon. No, it was never canon. Disney only stressed out what George Lucas has always considered since the beginning. The expanded universe was never canon. The only thing that was canon during the Lucas era was the 6 movies, and then later the TV show. That's it. So for those of you who are still under the impression that the expanded universe was once canon, it was never canon. Get that out of your head.
Deal with it.
After all that build-up in that argument with her husband, we did get to see Mon Mothma's dinner scene. In one hand, it's kind of disappointing that we didn't get to see more of the political bureaucracy debate with the Senate bill being debated. George Lucas would have loved it, and the dinner scene would have fleshed out the already tense character relationship with Perrin Firtha. But here's the thing, that would have stopped the storyline dead in its tracks and boggled down on boring political intrigue that episode 1 both drew toxic criticism, yet at the same time it was refreshing to see that a filmmaker would take the time to put in essential political debates that is honestly in real life will decide your future and alter your life. Boring political intrigue? You better be paying attention. But in substitute, instead of Imperial bureaucracy such that we've seen at play at the Imperial Security Bureau, we get to see the aftermath of that disaster in a more intimate personal scene that we haven't seen since Uncle Owen argued with Aunt Beru in the Star Wars. And Leida Mothma just had it up to here with Mommy Mothma. The thing with leadership like senators and rebel leaders is that you think they'd make a good mommy and daddy. After all, military robots like the T-800 turned out to be the best dad anyone could ever have. The Terminator would never stop, it would never leave him, and it would never hurt him, never shout at him, or get drunk and hit him, or say it was too busy to spend time with him. It will always be there, and it would die to protect him. Of all the would-be fathers who came and went over the years, this machine was the only one who measured up. That's right, your daddy sucks. And turned out, Mommy Mothma was the kind of mom that just won't listen. It's not a phase, Mom. Stop telling her what to do. I mean, after Ferrin Firtha being a buddy-buddy with her political opponent and hanging out with them for dinner, this time it's kind of her fault to keep telling her daughter what to do and not listening to her needs. That being said, living with this family must have sucked for Mon Mothma. As bad as what happened with her daughter, Mon is not a bad person. And the subtlety, the way they depict this, is a masterclass in writing. You see, when she visited Luton, it was established that she's got a new driver, and it was implied that this was part of the Imperial Intelligence Service to spy on her.
I feel under siege.
The driver's name was mentioned when Perrin Firtha told her of his arrival.
Cloris. You know his name.
But in contrast to Mon Mothma's personality, he didn't care enough to remember his name when he asked her about it for the second time that day.
What's his name?
Cloris.
And tell him to take the expressway. Guess she was right about his disinterest in the Foundation.
That's charitable.
This simple gesture amplifies the sincerity in Mon Mothma's character of wanting to help the little people both in the Senate and in her personal life, even when she suspected them of espionage. Maybe doubly so. And note how Leida's last name was Mothma, not Firtha as Perrin was. There seems to be a backstory there, but that's a story for another time. Subscribe!